Hello there and welcome to Code Rage 10. This is the InterBase XE7 product address. InterBase obviously is the home of change views, which we're going to be having a look at as we go through, along with some great stories and a few bits around the edges too. So my name is Stephen Ball. I am the Associate Product Manager here at Embarcadero for InterBase. If you'd like to contact me, then please either use the chat window if you're watching this live. If you're watching it on recording or on demand, then feel free to drop me an email or send me a tweet at DelphiaBall, or my email stephen.ball@embarcadero.com. Now, as we go through, there are some additional resources up on my blog, which is on the screen there, and specific lessons taking you through change views and notes about the different updates for InterBase. So if you do want to find more around the product, then obviously first try the InterBase homepage and equally have a look at my blog. So the session today, we're going to have a quick overview of what InterBase is, some stories of where users are using it, which gives you a good idea of the capabilities of the product. We're going to have a look around what came in with the XE7 release back in December, and there have been some updates since then, so we'll cover a few of those bits through. We'll also cover some of the features that we're working at on the roadmap, and if you'd like to get involved as a beta tester, then feel free to reach out to me and we can get that sorted through. And we'll also talk a little bit about the VAR program, and the VAR program is an important way that we can help you as developers get your products to market in a very cost-effective and practical way that licenses according to your business models as well. So InterBase really does help you kickstart your applications with must-have data security, synchronization, and disaster recovery features. And all of this is built into a database that you can embed, deploy, and relax about. Now, when we say embed, we term InterBase as an embeddable database. What that means is that it can be silently installed with your system. You don't need to install it separately and then have a DBA spend a whole load of time setting it up and configuring it. It installs as part of your product, either as a standalone install or silently underneath the hood as part of the installer. But also we have a deeply embeddable version, which you can use as a driver for talking back to a server, or you can run as an embedded database engine for your application to have its own unique to it connection to a database that's not a shared database but is a standalone database, and that's something that the deeply embedded versions provide. So because InterBase is an embeddable and deeply embeddable database, we're able to provide InterBase out to you on many platforms. We're not only able to cover the server side, where you can have clients connecting in. We provide Windows and Linux server versions, both 32 and 64-bit. But we're also able to provide a deeply embeddable database that runs out on Windows, on Mac, on iOS and Android. That's with the To-Go and IB Lite versions of InterBase. That's pretty well fully featured, and also can be used as a client to connect back to a remote server. So not only can you do local data storage, you can also connect to data across the network directly from one of those devices. So I want to share some stories with you, and the first one is one that I really love. This is Spinali Design. It's a French company who have created the connected bikini, and they also do a connected towel, which there's a chip that you can move between your bikini and your towel. It tracks how long you've been in the sun. It reads the UV rays to work out the power of the sun, and then alerts you when it's time to top up your sun cream. And they also have a Valentine's Day version which alerts your partner that it's time to come and top up your sun cream. So some quite fun stuff really. But on a serious note, this data is being tracked out into an InterBase database on the device and is being used locally to be able to make a decision about when you need to update your sun cream. And that's all powered through Delphi and IB Lite. So another one of the great stories is with Management Plus. Now these guys are based out of Salt Lake City and are one of the leading suppliers of electronic health record systems, specifically for dealing with eyes and eye care. And they have a broad customer base with a number of kind of small shops, all the way through to big clinics. And InterBase really helps them because obviously with electronic health records, it needs to be properly securely stored. And with 256-bit AES encryption, they're able to meet the standards and requirements that they need for the storage and safe storage of electronic health records at rest. And they've been working not only through their traditional client server projects, but also they're now able to take their current data model, the data layer, with all the testing that they've done on the data and the data at rest, and they're able to start expanding that very, very simply across to mobile, which gives them a huge competitive advantage because they're already using something that's tried and tested and are able to actually then apply that out onto mobile space as well, which has a whole load of different challenges. So if you're interested about the challenges around mobilization, obviously security is just one of them, then definitely have a look on the InterBase homepage. There's some articles and video replays on the right-hand side. We did a great session of mobilizing data and the key things to look out for around data security there, so definitely worth having a check through there. Now, one of the things that's very interesting about Management Plus is that they have a reasonably small development team, and they're a very capable team, but then their time is very, very valuable. And they don't want to be spending all their time ending up as, the back-end support. And they don't want to have the cost of a full-time DBA. And that's one of the things that InterBase really has empowered them around with their business, which has been, one of the driving factors around why it's been so cost-effective for them and affordable to use InterBase. Because once it's embedded, they're able just to deploy it and get on with their next project, rather than having to kind of manage 24/7 the whole database server and systems that are out there. Another example is BiNuclear. These guys are based in Puerto Rico, and they're kind of another part of the medical industry. They're doing a lot of lab work. In fact, sound very similar to a company that I visited recently, another InterBase customer in the Netherlands, who are one of the industry leaders for kind of dealing with all the Petri dishes and growing stuff in the labs and monitoring everything on that side of things, trying to match the drugs together to the patient. With BiNuclear, again, very similar to Management Plus, small development team, need to make sure that the stuff works. They also need to make sure that it works because they haven't got direct connections to a lot of the sites. So very important that they can leave it there and trust it's just going to keep running, especially when it's very difficult to actually get onto some of the sites they have spotted around the country. And again, with both of these companies, it's very important in medical that you don't lose data. It costs a lot of money to do blood tests and to run these tests and to collect the data that you need to be able to analyse, to work out what you need to do with a patient. And key features like journaling help make this a reality and make sure that even at the worst of times they're not losing data. Bonev is another great story. This is one of the leading financial applications in Bulgaria. They have over 5,000 customers across the country, ranging from people with just them and their laptop through to customer bases that are hundreds of people connecting into the same database. And they do a lot of financial reporting through to the tax authorities. They're doing a lot of supply chain management. They're used by people like Overgas Holdings, Armet, Cargill, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and also they've had their applications certified for use with the Bulgarian military for some of the work that they're doing. And if we can get the software running on their networks and things are okay, then we know that InterBase is a strong start point. And with Bonev, Valentin looked at a number of different databases, and InterBase had the right mix of ease of use, speed, great performance, obviously strong security, which is required to work with some of those customers, support behind it as well, and also the scalability that matched in deploying out to their very mixed customer base, but still allowing them to do that in a price model that worked exceptionally well for both them and their partners. So yes, InterBase is an embeddable database, but it really doesn't lack on features. It is very scalable, very, very powerful, very simple to deploy, has full built-in encryption on the paid versions, great self-tuning engine. It includes some exceptionally powerful features. Some we'll talk a little bit more about in this, and also the following on session to this at Code Rage, which is around change views. We've had 15 years now of multi-processor support, which I know from talking to people who have been moving back to InterBase. The speed and performance of InterBase really blew them away when they were running their existing databases back onto InterBase. And over here on the right, key things like disaster recovery, point-in-time recovery. Point-in-time recovery allowing you to literally go back to a previous point in time and get the database as it was at that point, if you so need to, is a very important feature when it comes to tracking and dealing with data. Now, one of the other things that we're very proud of with InterBase is that it not only works with C++ Builder and Delphi and the Rad Studio products, but we have a huge number of customers using it with PHP, with Eclipse, with Xcode, with Visual Studio. In fact, one of our biggest customers is a Visual Studio customer. So let's have a look at what's new around InterBase. Key thing is really, with XE7, it's about running faster, running longer, and allowing you to code a lot smarter. So very, very quickly, XE, we introduced dynamic SQL in stored procedures. There were some great improvements in terms of large object handling, which really sped up the database, moving blobs out of the way unless they were actually really needed. Some improved security, much stronger crypto hashing, much faster database sweep. We have one customer who is doing tens of thousands of transactions an hour, and the database sweep for them, on the traditional model, took about a minute to run. With the fast database sweep, it's done within a second. So some incredible speed performance around the database sweep, and much larger database support. XE3, we introduced the single cross-platform database structure. That meant you can literally move your database file between multiple different platforms without having to back it up and restore it. And we also introduced iOS and Android, and the free IB Lite edition had the 64-bit ODBC drivers introduced, and some updates for the JDBC. The 64-bit ODBC driver. Moving on to XE7, which is the current release. Obviously, Linux 64-bit is brand new for us, and a big part of that also is we now have support for Ubuntu and the latest SUSE and Red Hat Enterprise. So, Linux 64-bit is brand new, which is great. Gives you the power of 64-bit now on Linux, which is a much cheaper server platform to run if you want to go and do so. Also, with the ability to run longer, we had some customers who were doing tens of thousands of transactions an hour, and they're getting to the point after about a month that they had to schedule maintenance to back up and restore the database. Well, now with XE7, we've changed from a 32-bit to a 64-bit transaction ID, and this is allowing us to run even at 10,000 transactions a second, you'd be running for 150 years before we'd run out of transaction IDs. For most customers, this would never be a problem, and I certainly am not going to be around in 150 years' time if somebody doesn't need to back up and restore a database. But I think they may end up doing that before that point anyway. So that's a pretty good time span for that. Change views, which I'll mention briefly in a moment but they are a brand new patent pending way of tracking data and being able to pick up specifically what's changed just for you. There's a whole load of speed and performance updates under the hood. We've got some improvements around the backup and disaster recovery. So we now have an incremental backup as well, which allows you to back up the database, but then when you've done the backup, when you tell it to back up again, you can tell it to only back up and it will find what's changed and then update the backup. So it's a lot quicker rather than rebacking up the entire database. So incremental backups are a very, very powerful feature. Reduce CPU use and server load, and keep your backups up to date a lot quicker so you can run them a lot more regularly as well. There's some new developer APIs for the journaling, in fact, which I've got listed at the bottom as well. We also now have a new ODS on-disk structure, which allows us to take, it introduces kind of the new things around change views and the incremental backups and so on. We support with XE7 ODS 13 and above. Easiest way to get onto the new ODS and get the new features is to back up and restore the database, and off you get ready to go. But we've also introduced for developers the ability to keep current. You can stay on the latest version of InterBase, and even if your customers are on older versions, you can take advantage of the power in the newer version to do the work that you need to do, and then you can back up your database to an older version when you restore it back out, ready to put back onto your customer's site if you need to. Now, change views. Change views, I'm not going to talk a lot about in here because we have a whole session running through them. I will draw your eye to the URL on the screen. Definitely worth making a note of that right now. That's change views WP. That's the embt.co/change views WP, capital C, V, and WP. The change views white paper really goes in depth about the differences between change views, replication technologies, using triggers and date fields, and how it's very, very different. And I say, change views is dramatically reducing the amount of data traffic that needs to be made. It's opening doors for people who are wanting to put scalability into the data movement. I'll give you one example. We've been working with a pharmacy chain who have 30,000 pharmacies, and they currently moving a few terabytes of data a week across their network to update in its entirety a SQL Server database that has the medicine information in it, which is required by the pharmacists when they're printing out the labels for the bottles and doing everything else like that on site. And using change views, we're actually allowing them to put a copy of InterBase next to the SQL Server database, and then centrally doing a record-by-record comparison, which is updating the InterBase database with the data that's in the SQL Server one. In fact, I spoke about this at DataU just a couple of weeks ago, and we did the first mapping with ER Studio, and then they just run this tool to pick up the changes, update the InterBase database, and then the 30,000 pharmacies are allowed to connect into the InterBase database, identify themselves, and then the InterBase database will know what's specifically changed in the data at a field level for them. So rather than pushing hundreds of megs per site around, they're pushing a few meg at the most per site. And that's allowed them to dramatically reduce the cost of their data movement and start being able to, in essence, replicate data in a way that traditional replication technologies just won't scale to. And all of this is done with no log tables, no additional fields set up in the database, at field level granularity, no timestamps to worry about, no time zones, no locking of tables. It's just very scalable and works. So if you want to find out more about change views, join the session that we've got running after this one on change views specifically, or again, check out my blog and pick up the links there and come find out more about change views. Now this is a Delphi example of actually updating the database once you're using change views, and that literally is 3 different tables there with 3 local queries, 3 remote queries which are picking up the deltas, which are running the same SQL statement in them, and then just merging the data set with a single call to a FIDAC component and then apply updates, and that's dealing with the inserts, updates and deletes at a field level for you. Now, I mentioned briefly about disaster recovery earlier, and journaling. Disaster recovery is very, very important. When it comes to what's the worst that can happen, well, 60% of companies that lose their data will shut down within 6 months of the disaster. 31% of PC users have lost all of their files due to events beyond their control. Companies that lost their data center for 10 days or more due to a disaster. Half of them filed for bankruptcy. 93% of them filed for bankruptcy within 1 year of the disaster. It's important to be able to get your data back up and running. And interestingly, 34% of companies fail to test their tape backups. And of those that do, 77% of those have found that the tape backups have got failures on them. 6% of all PCs will suffer from an episode of data loss in any given year. So what this means is it's pretty important to be able to test your backup, to be able to make sure your backups are working, to be able to get your data onto another machine, to be able to move your data as you need to. If your server goes down and you've got 30,000 pharmacies that need to be able to kept up to date, you sure want to make sure that they've got the data down there already. So yes, there's a lot of movement to the cloud. It is important to be able to have data at rest, securely managed in different scenarios to allow the business to keep running, and also to be able to, if something does happen, that you can get that data back up and going very quickly. Now, in terms of the disaster recovery levels, obviously doing nothing is going to take you a while to get back up and running. If you've got a standard backup that's running, or if you're using the incremental backup, then you're as good as the last backup that you made. Now, typically people run those overnight, so you might be talking 24 hours that you lose at the most. However, if you really want to get down to not losing data, again, things like journaling, which again is one of the key reasons where InterBase is very popular globally with medical, and point-in-time recovery really do enable you to take your data recovery to the next level. And using the journals and having the journal files that log out really does mean that even if the server goes down and it has to reboot back up, you're able to apply those journals to your recent backup to bring you back up to the point that you were when the server went down. So that makes a huge difference to making sure you don't lose data. Now, the incremental backup's very, very easy to use. Just from IB console, go to backup and restore incremental backup. There's also a command line for it, which is gback -dump, then the source database and the destination backup file. And you can tell it if you want to overwrite the database or if you want it to provide just the incremental elements down to that dump. So that's a fair bit about InterBase. Just about the roadmap now. So we've delivered pretty much everything we were going to deliver and promised to deliver last year. We've been working hard on making sure that new features have got the extra oomph around the edges as we've been going through with XE7. We've delivered 4 updates with things that people are coming back. We're very responsive in making sure that if problems are found, we know these are your systems that are running on them. And although the certification process takes a few days to go through, we have that number of unit tests running. We've managed to deliver a few updates now to customers to make sure everybody keeps moving very smoothly. Now, on our roadmap, we're also now working and looking at delivering derived tables. We're looking at evaluating common table expressions. We're looking at code functions. So specifically for the embedded versions, these will allow you to have functionality similar to user-defined functions, where you can call back to your actual main application, have some code run there that you then return a value back to the database. We're also looking at faster on-disk expansion, which will help with customers who are wanting to log huge amounts of data exceptionally quickly to disk. InterBase is pretty good at this already, but we're looking to make that even faster. And we're also looking at additional enhancements around change views, indexing, and also our driver supports for ADPC, JDPC, and so on. Now, very quickly, InterBase is available through the shop. It's also available directly through your sales reps. Our list pricing for InterBase starts from around about just under $13 a license, and for the embedded versions, we have a VAR program load that we do highly recommend. If you're deploying InterBase a lot with your products to a range of different customers, then talk to us directly, and we can really help you through the pricing there. If you're interested in becoming a VAR, then we have an SDK Pack, which is the first step really on that road. We have a very, very simple, no-nonsense VAR agreement. We'd like to keep things simple for you and for us. And we also have an online portal that you can see your usage through. It's a very low-risk sign-up process. Basically, the way it works, once you've got your SDK Pack, and that allows us to then start talking with you around the commercials, making sure that we can make a model that fits for both you and for us. But also the SDK Pack allows you to do the testing with your installation and your development team, and train your sales team on how to use the products. And then once everything's completed, we then give you your live keys, which you just swap out with your SDK one. The SDK Pack includes full 256-bit AES encryption, which is the level above what's available in the Developer Edition. We also include licenses that will run for spanning a year. You get basically license keys that are valid for 60 days at a time, and they can be quietly installed and tested with for InterBase Server, Desktop, and the To-Go edition. So in summary, InterBase really is around. It's part of the Internet of Things. We've seen the great story with Spinali Design with their connected bikini. We've had a look at some of the great stuff that's going on around medical with the connectivity around there. InterBase is also very big in POS systems globally. And a big part of this is because it's the small footprint. You can just embed, deploy, relax. It runs across all the platforms that you need to reach today and tomorrow. It has a very low cost of ownership because of the zero administration, the automatic crash recovery, the capabilities around journaling as part of that, to ensure you don't lose any data. The great encryption support. And I say it is a very low cost database engine to run, not only in the upfront cost, but in terms of what it costs you to support it, maintain it, and to have the systems run with it on. I'd highly recommend going and having a look at the product pages for InterBase. There's additional webinars and links to white papers and bits up there. There's also some great documentation on docwiki.embarcadero.com, which is where all our InterBase documentation is moving to. The old style docs are still available at docs.embarcadero.com/products/InterBase. Also, up on the InterBase page, you'll be able to find the link to the videos, or there's the direct link at the bottom, which is the InterBase-Labs URL. And there's a set of different videos taking you through using domains and all the kind of cool features that InterBase has built into it. So now really it's time for Q&A.
Okay, let's see. David I here. Let me bring Stephen. Are you there?
I am here, David. Good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you are.
Yeah, good morning. The sun's come up finally here in Scotts Valley. Okay, enough of that. Rob is saying under the hood, question mark? Surely you mean under the bonnet.
No, I'm from the UK. So yes, bonnet would be much better, but I think even we use under the hood as a phrase rather than under the bonnet. But yes, maybe I need to get some more tea out and get my my shortbread out for this time of day, and then I'll be able to say under the bonnet.
So just to remind everyone for the different editions, the Grad Studio, C++ Builder, Delphi come with the developer edition, so you can prototype and develop your apps, right?
Yeah, so the developer edition is installed with the IDE. By default, it goes on to port 3050. And if you install multiple IDEs on the machine, you might see a message saying, "Hey, do you want to install it on the same instance, or do you want it to run side by side?" Because one of the great things about InterBase is you can have multiple versions of it running on the same machine, which is kind of cool. But if you're not using the products and you want to get the developer edition, just go to the website. You can hit the download free version. You can download the developer edition. You'll get a license key sent to you automatically. And if you want to try it with a customer, then we do a 90-day free trial, which allows up to 20 users on the machine to be running it, so they can actually try it and make sure it's all good for them. But the best thing is if you're looking to produce applications that you're going to be selling a lot to customers, then get on to the BAR program and then get onto the SDK Pack, because that by far gives your customers and you the best experience of being able to do it really quickly and easily.
And then for running it as a server in deployment, there's server editions for, what is it, Linux, Windows? Right.
Yes, we have Windows 32 and 64-bit been around for a while now. With XE7, we've introduced 64-bit Linux as well. So if you do want to reduce the costs of your deployment and you don't want to have your database server having to pay a Windows license and extra for that, then you can just run a Linux box out. And we support Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6 and 7, CCI 11.3, and Ubuntu is brand new as a Linux platform in XE7 as well. So that also comes in 32 and 64-bit for Ubuntu 14.
And then for InterBase to go and IB Lite, there's static libraries, is that right? And then for some DLLs or dilibs, and it's just the license key that makes the difference, is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. The IB Lite and To Go are binary compatible, so they actually run the same binaries which are linked into your applications. If you're using Delphi or C++ Builder, then just go to the deployment options and enable the feature for InterBase, and in there you'll find there's a location for the license file to go. You just literally put the license file there once on your machine, and then that's it, job done. It will deploy that out with your application. And what you can do, and what we have seen a few people do, is they've used IB Lite to do a simple version of their application, and then they use the InterBase to go features with the encryption for the data at rest, with the change views, with those capabilities to actually do an in-app purchase. So they have a method that goes and remotely collects their specific license file, downloads it to their application and puts it in the file structure on their Android or iOS device, and then just tells the customer to restart their application, and then it restarts, it finds the new license file, and then licenses the application to run with the full features of To Go, which gives them more on-disk space and stuff as well. So yeah, really easy to do that.
Yeah, and again, for IB Lite and To Go, it's on all 4 platforms that CBuilder supports, is that right? Windows, iOS, Android, OS 10?
Yes.
Okay. And all of the information about those, the easiest way that I keep it straight, I'm just, it's early here, but is off the product page for InterBase. On the right-hand side, there's a link for the InterBase editions. And it has a very nice chart that'll show you what's in each edition. And IB Lite is free deploy, is that right? Or do you have to do something each year?
No, IB Lite is free to deploy forever. You just you get your license and off you go.
Yep. And then one of the things I also know, and this is maybe a tip for developers, if you install InterBase and you do something with multi-instance, for example, I have InterBase Server running on my Windows machine, but then I install the IDE and it pops up that message during the install time. Do you want to overwrite your existing InterBase configuration, or do you want to run a multi-instance and it gives you another port number and it creates an instance name, InterBase, what is it, _xe7 or something. Mm-hmm. The thing to take care if you have that kind of configuration is pay attention to two things. One is if you've got an InterBase path environment variable for your system, check to, and that's fine, just do set and see the InterBase home path that's in your system environment variables. Then go into IDE under Tools, Options, Environment Variables, and take care to see what the IDE thinks the InterBase home is. If you have one instance of InterBase and you overwrite all the time because you want the latest XE7 and so on, then those two will match up. But I sometimes get caught up in having two instances running on different ports. My IDE has that environment variable for InterBase versus my system environment variable pointing to a different one. So just take care if you have that kind of configuration to understand what your Windows system environment InterBase home and variable is and path versus the IDE InterBase path. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, sounds pretty good to me.
Okay. So Rob is asking, is the VAR agreement charged per year, or is that a negotiation?
No, so basically, if you're looking to use InterBase with your product, for example, I was an InterBase VAR for about 10 years before I joined Embarcadero, and we had health club management software. We knew we were going to have a certain amount of sales each year, which then we were able to work out a price for the user instances. And quite typical with a VAR agreement, we know that you're going to be selling X number of licenses through a year. That might be that you have a lot of people who are buying one or two licenses. It might be you might have one customer one or two customers who buy a few hundred licenses. But we work with you to make a model that helps your business to get that to market. So yeah, basically the way the VAR program works is that typically you'll have a certain buy-in level, and then that's used as credit on your account, and then you just work your way through that, and if we need to top it up, we'll top it up. But the best thing to do is have a chat with one of the sales guys. They can listen to what you're wanting to do, how you work. We've got a range of different companies who work in quite different ways, but we try to find something that's going to work for you to help get your product to market and understand your business model. And so far we've been pretty successful at making sure that happens, and some great stories out there for what people are doing. So.
Okay, so just best to contact sales, our reselling partners, and they can...
Yeah, if you let us know where you are in the world, then we can try and make sure we get the right person to reach out to you. If you put your message through the chat, we can keep that private and pass that on. Yep. Or just contact your local sales office. All the details on the Embarcadero website.
Yeah, I also know on our website we have, shoot, now I have to remember, I brought this up and now I have to remember where it is. We have testimonials. We also have case studies of people that are using InterBase. So if I go to Embarcadero.com, I can type this morning, and if I look under the resources, case studies, I think it is. It's not all of our case studies or testimonials, but there's some. You can filter. I'll put that in the chat window. Let's put that in the chat window. So I'll say that's going to everyone. That's the InterBase, or sorry, that's the case studies URL. And then if you click on InterBase, you can filter by InterBase, for example, and you'll find, for example, just recently, September 15th, Lab Info Systems. Here, let me turn on my screen. I was on your.
Yeah, that's one of the ones that we covered earlier in this webinar. Yeah, great guys.
But one of the things that most people don't realize is that InterBase is inside of all sorts of different systems, and you don't really know it. I mean, there's no big InterBase logo or powered by InterBase on the side. When you go through, in the U.S. at least, in Canada, probably elsewhere in the world, when you go through airport security scanning, or if you put your bags through these big tunnels, and it goes off into who knows where, you'll see the InterBase is buried in a lot of those devices, and it has in the InterBase database all sorts of secure information about things that those devices are looking for and sniffing for and so on. But there's other ones, Lab Info Systems that you talked about, InterBase. InterBase just sits and runs, and that's one of the great things we talk about all the time is it's like, develop, deploy, and forget about it. You don't need a DBA to come in all the time. It's used in point-of-sale systems around the world, retail operations, where the people in the store, like if it's a grocery store or a convenience store at a gas station, petrol station, okay, then it's just running, and those people won't know to bring up IB console or figure out how to do something with the database. And then, which we talked about, and I think we're going to talk about in the next session, a really cool application of how they sped up their database updates out in the field, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to cover that through in the change use session.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, change use is making a huge difference to briefcasing data, and to briefcasing data is one of those things that's always been really kind of useful, especially when you've kind of been popping into the office, getting on the local network. But now getting that capability out onto mobile, you've got so many more worries around data cost and a whole lot of other things. And with change use just being able to give you the delta no matter how long it is that you've been disconnected for, it really is. It makes such a huge difference to the opportunities around IoT and to mobilization of data, especially, which makes it a very, very exciting technology for now. But talking to the stories around InterBase, there's some great stories over time. I know we always talk about, there's the one in the tanks, and there's a copy of InterBase that's being used over on Mars at the moment. So it's truly an out-of-this-world technology. The reason it's used on the Mars rover is a bit too far to send to DBA, right? But I don't know, I think a few people may have seen this film Martian recently, which has come out. Somebody getting out to Mars, and that might give you an idea about why it's a bit too far to send a DBA out. Yeah. But also, I think one of the ones that I think you heard about, David, when you went down to NASA one time, was the space shuttle, and all the cargo manifest was run through InterBase as they're getting the cargo in and out of the International Space Station off the shuttle or something.
There's different kinds of apps all over. I think there was another one in some of the emergency call processing solutions, some of the vendors ship.
I think Motorola's
InterBase is sitting in there, but you call the emergency services and they're looking up things and so on. They're querying InterBase database under the covers, and again, that's an emergency call center. They don't know what database is running underneath and so on, but it's all there. Rob is asking about let's see. He's asking if we have any comparison materials or documents to compare InterBase with other databases. Let's see. And if there is, or maybe they should talk to the salespeople to get the materials. are they suitable for digesting by non-developers, the people who write the checks? And he spelled it CHEQUES instead of CHEQ.
Oh, lovely spelling of the word check there. There is, Rob, if you want to, if you want to reach out to me directly, I can send you some combinations of some stuff that we've been working on. I have got a private URL at the moment which we're working through, which is basically a summary of the case studies that are here on the page. The case studies that David's put out there are actually really, really good. The one for Management Plus, which is all medical, the one for biolabs, again medical, but very different kind of stories between the two facilities, and the BiNuclear ones where the guys have really got labs across the country that, you know, it's hard work getting out to, so they need the systems just to run. The BSoft one, Bonev, again, you know, those guys are providing some great customer names listed in there, which are always good to help non-technical people read and understand. The other thing, definitely the white papers and the video replays that we've got online. A number of those are actually really friendly for people who aren't necessarily technical, have a level of technical experience but not developers, so to speak. You can see those on the right-hand side of the screen there. There's the link to the change views white paper. There's the session about securing data, base applications, that's there as well. They're definitely worth having a look through. And then the feature matrix and the data sheets are really kind of about the products themselves. But the feature matrix itself has some text information a little bit more than the data sheet does. So they're definitely the key assets to go and have a look at. In terms of the comparison between MySQL or SQL Server or Oracle or something, there's an old, well, a few years old now, paper up on Code Central. I think it's a comparison between one of the old editions of MySQL and InterBase that Bill Todd did. We've not got that updated yet. It's something that, you know, is on our list of things, our wish list of things to do at some point. Yeah, that's a useful start point. But if you need a chat to help go through some of that stuff, then just reach out to us, and either myself or Al Manarino, who's one of my US technical sales consultants for InterBase, and Teos down in Germany or wherever. You know, there's a few of us around the world. Damo down in Australia. We can get on a call and we can help discuss that kind of stuff through if you need us to.
Yeah, and I put Stephen's email address in the question log. You should see that. I've put the editions and case studies links in the chat window. So at the editions comparison is up there right now, and as you see over in the right-hand corner, there's feature matrix and data sheet links you can click on if you go to the product edition or just to the product page. So, okay, Stephen, do you have any last words, at least for now, because you're coming up, and if people can queue up their questions. The change view session coming up next, well, let me bring up the schedule. The change view session, this is really cool technology that's new in InterBase XE7, fully supported by FireDAC component access in 10 Seattle. So you know, stick around for that. You're going to see some really cool demos and how it can greatly benefit your performance and efficiency of doing database updates, both for your servers, client applications, and so on. Right, Stephen?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm going to dig into some of the language and how you set them up. Change views are just awesome. You know, rather than having to worry about extra date fields and triggers and, you know, bidirectional infinite loops of data moving back and forth. It just, you know, I've done using the old InterBase replication technology that's now the technology that's owned by OB Phoenix and was promoted for the Firebird guys. You know, I've done probably somewhere in the region of about 120, 130 installations of that in the past. Getting beyond about 5 or 6 databases is painful, truly painful. And so, we're going to be going through a story where we've had a customer who's working on 30,000 remote destinations to keep their data up to date using change queues. And it doesn't make a difference in terms of the database speed and performance if it's one or a million different destinations that you're tracking to. So definitely hang around and find out about that.